Hello everybody, after the Easter holidays. I'm at the end of my garden in the allotment bit because it's the only place I don't have children running around, although Ferdy, my dog, is still here of course. I hope you all had a really lovely Easter and more importantly that you're all keeping well in these crazy times. If you can bear to focus your mind on structured interviews for a bit, the last of our positivist techniques for now, let's have a go. Right, so what is a structured interview? Well, we talked about this before, and I remember saying that a structured interview is really the same piece of paper as a questionnaire. But with a questionnaire, it's self-completion. You hand it to people and they fill it in perhaps in private. With a structured interview, you keep hold of the bit of paper and then you fill in the answers. Now, a structured interview, much like a questionnaire, tends to be closed answers. So 1 to 10, strongly disagree to agree, etc., etc. I'm looking at page, no page number on it, wouldn't you? Yes, 28 in the booklet, page 28 in the booklet. And if you'd like to start the reading on it in your home textbook in Harry Lamberson Holborn, it's pages 209 to 212. But be aware, don't be confused, because it looks at structured interviews and unstructured interviews. So don't think you've gone wrong. It's all covered in those notes. Okay. So, in its simplest form then, as I've put here, a structured interview involves one person, this wind is working against me, asking another person a list of predetermined questions about a carefully selected topic. There we go. So you're going to test your hypothesis with a structured interview in this case. So let's run through some of the strengths and weaknesses, and then you can fill them in the booklet. And then add some examples from the textbook and any other additional notes that are useful. It looks like my iPad's about to go flying as well. Okay, so strengths of the method. Let's just follow them as they are in the book. So I think an important thing is that it enables the researcher to examine the level of understanding that the respondent has on a particular topic. So because you're sitting face to face with them, you're going to be able to glean how much they understand about that topic. And you may offer them additional insight or additional information if you need to. So there's one advantage, and really linked to that at the top of the next page. And I've mentioned this before, I know. It can be used as a powerful form of formative assessment. Now, can you remember what formative assessment is? It's essentially seeing if those, with a short technique like a structured interview, whether the respondents are going to be of interest to you for more in-depth research, such as observation, or unstructured interviews, which are way more time-consuming. An example of that I'm sure you'll already know is Carol Jackson and the Lads and the Ladettes, where she gave students a large amount, a huge sample of students, questionnaires about whether they were in student subcultures on that or not, and then picked from that which students were of particular interest to her for their views on subcultures, and did rather more time-consuming unstructured interviews with them in order to add validity to her research. Okay, so there's 1-2 example advantages of structured interviews. Another theoretical advantage is that they tend to be high in reliability. So remember, the two words you're looking for reliability, I can hear a child about to fly at me, are reliable. No, we're talking about that. I'm sorry, I'm distracted by my child now. Are standardised, and can you replicate it easily? And of course, with a structured interview, you can, because you're asking everyone the exact same questions, and you are then able to process your data in quite an easy way. You're going to get really easy to crunch qualitative data from your yes or no's, your agrees, strongly disagrees, and then of course you can the plastic greenhouse is now falling over. It's all working against me here. And you can then spot, of course, trends and patterns, themes that might run through the answers. So, for example, do more girls state one thing than boys? Are certain ethnic minorities prone to giving one response? Is age a factor? Etc., etc. Okay. The next advantage is a practical one. And that is that the research is able to contact quite large numbers of people quickly, easily and efficiently. So these are quick. Typically, sorry, you may only have 10 to 20 questions. And because they're tick boxes, it's not going to take up much of anyone's time. And so you may be able to gather quite a large sample quite quickly and easily. So practically that's an advantage. And of course, this might, I mean, a large sample doesn't necessarily mean it's representative, but it may make it easier to gather a representative sample. And remember, if your sample is representative, i.e., it accurately reflects the socioeconomic factors of your target population, then you can generalise your answers to the target population. Okay. Ethically, an advantage of structured interviews, certainly over questionnaires, is that because you're face to face with people, you'll be able to spot if they're upset, whether any of the questions are causing them harm or distress. And therefore, you'll be able to allow them to stop rather than poke them with a stick and ask them to keep answering. You would hopefully, if you saw them getting upset, stop the research in order to protect your sample, your respondents. Okay. So there's some advantages. Hello, Ferdy. Come on then. I know what's going to happen. Whoa! I've now lost my page. I'm going to do the disadvantages now. But first, come on then. Bloody Doble. Come on. He's going to start barking if I don't do this. Right, here he is. The increasingly furry and grotty dog that is Ferdy. Right, let's talk about weaknesses or disadvantages now of this technique. I said it's in some senses quite a quick way to get a large representative sample because the technique itself won't take that long. But actually, because you need researchers to be asking the questions, it's going to take you a lot longer than questionnaires. In a sense, the respondent does all the work there. You've just got to hand them out. But with this one, you need to be face to face. So in that sense, it is going to take longer and be more time consuming. The problem with that, of course, is that researchers are often on very limited budgets from universities and won't have the time or the resources to do that many interviews. Okay. Secondly, the quality, I've put this on the sheet, the quality and usefulness of the information is really very dependent on the quality of the questions being asked and, of course, the person that's asking them, the researcher. So if all of your questions are slightly irrelevant to the hypothesis or they're not clear, the terms aren't operationalised clearly, or they're leading or loaded, you're certainly not going to get good results. There may be huge bias in them from leading or loaded questions. Equally, there may be researcher bias in the way they ask the questions. So you may even subconsciously, if you wanted your respondents to give a positive answer, you might find yourself nodding along with them, encouraging them. We've talked about how tone of voice as well can influence the person that you're talking to. So if I said, "You enjoying lockdown?" the majority of people would probably say no because I'd clearly expected that answer. If I, however, use the tone of voice to go, "Are you enjoying lockdown?" more people might give, I can see how ridiculous I like doing that, more people might give an affirmative answer because that's clearly what I'm after. Nodding, body language, etc. can all lead people to answer in a certain way. So the researcher has to be extremely careful, that they don't use researcher bias in the collection of the data. The next one I've put is that that is the next one I've put, is that a substantial amount of pre-planning is required. So this as well could be time-consuming, expensive practically for a poor researcher. So not only have you got to try and gather quite a large representative sample and actually access them face to face, but of course, if you're not going to do all that yourself, you've also got to train up your researchers to ask these questions in exactly the same way with no bias themselves. So all of that could be quite time consuming and expensive for the researcher. Next, the format of the questionnaire makes it difficult for the researcher to examine complex issues and opinions. If you are getting yes and no answers to everything, or agree, strong, disagree, etc., then you are not going to get any depth. There is going to be validity missing. There will not be a lot of depth to the answers. And equally, you're very unlikely to get very much of a stay-in, i.e. understanding their answers, the reasons behind the answers from the respondent's point of view, just from a quick-fire structured interview. Lastly, there could be more researcher bias in the interpretation of the statistics. So, of course, even statistics can be manipulated. I think I gave examples before. If on your structured interviews, 55% said we want lockdown to continue for as long as possible, and 45% said we've had enough, we're all wanting to go out and get herd immunity. You could say it was a clear victory to those that wanted lockdown to remain, but of course 10% is a small amount. You could phrase that in lots of different ways. There's still room for interpreting the data in a biased way to either support or disprove a hypothesis. Okay. If you could take notes from that, that would be great on the sheets. And then also, if you could take the notes from the textbook, that would be brilliant. And it will lead on to the next thing that we're going to do. Now, oh God, this dog is just literally falling all over the place. You're not making this easy, Ferdy. Oh, he's gone. Page 30 in the booklet, positivist observation techniques. I'm going to leave for now. I've never seen it come up on an exam paper, but I just like to cover all potential angles. But we'll talk about that when I see you again, which hopefully will be before your exams. Or before the end of the decade, for example. Okay, so we'll leave it there. And next lesson, we're going to go on to interpretivist techniques of research. So I'll speak to you later. Bye-bye.